Greg Wilhelm, 33, from Novato, California, cherished nature and investigating new spots. His adoration for the outside began youthful with the Scouts and went on with his RC inclusion, showing him discipline and a profound regard for the climate over the course of his time at Lovely Valley, Kaloa, and San Marine secondary schools. Greg was known for his accommodating nature and capacity to make enduring companions. However, he confronted difficulties too, which drove him to go to a collectedness secondary school in San Rafael. This was a defining moment for him, where he joined a 12-step program that assisted him with finding himself again. Greg couldn't have cared less about the climate in his own life. He made it part of his vocation too. He began green, pulling a business zeroed in on being thoughtful to the planet, showing his focus on making a contrast. He was additionally truly into green innovation, like sun-based power and electric vehicles, particularly the Tesla S3, in light of the fact that he needed to assist with making a superior future. Greg's adoration for experience and the climate attracted him to jumping, a leisure activity. He immediately went gaga for the excellence. Furthermore, Secret of the Ocean captivated him. Cave jumping was the following stage for him, regardless of its risks, since he generally needed to investigate more. His enthusiasm developed when he found out about the one-up Panapa cave, a V in Maui known for their magnificence and secret. Despite the fact that it's delightful, this region is brimming with perils like unsafe climbs, solid blow openings, and ocean buckles that look welcoming, however, are extremely hazardous. The Panapa waters sparkle flawlessly, concealing the risky flows and sharp shakes just beneath them. Many signs in the recreation area caution individuals about the risks of enormous waves, falling rocks, and the solid flows that swimmers need to keep an eye out for. The pool caverns at lower leg level, which used to be simpler to get into yet are currently concealed by thick plants, actually attract those searching for experience, regardless of the hard ways and the virus. Water took care of. By springs, these submerged caverns are dim and require some sort of light to see. The individuals who try to go further into the tight, limited ways that lead far into the cavern could find something uniquely great, or persuade lost at absolutely no point ever to be found in the future. Greg knew very well how unsafe this experience could be. His companions cautioned him, saying, "Hello, man. This spot is truly hazardous. I don't know, we ought to go investigate it. You've been here previously, however it appears as though it very well may be more risky this time, and we don't know whether we're prepared for that." Notwithstanding knowing the risks, Greg was exceptionally cautious with his arrangements. He showed his companions that he was checking all that to ensure they would be all around as protected as conceivable. He additionally got exhortation from specialists who had investigated profound caverns in the US previously. However, it supposedly on it shows he wasn't that prearranged. In January 2017, Greg, joined by an affectionate gathering of companions, set out for one Panapa State Park, drawn by the stories of stowed-away sinkholes and submerged entries that promised the sort of experience Greg lived for. The general vibes, a mix of energy and wariness, set up for what was to be a significant investigation of the actual cavern, as well as their own cut-off points and fears. They strolled through the recreation area until they arrived at a swimming opening. From that point, they could see the cavern entrance. The water looked extremely clear and inviting, so they generally bounced in. They began making quips to one another, and their chuckling reverberated in the cavern, making unusual sounds. It was loads of fun. They felt as though they were in an old spot as a result of the sharp shakes that stuck out. These stones looked a piece startling and were not normal for anything they had seen before. The water in the cavern was shockingly chilly, prompting vulnerability. About the span of their visit, some indicated a craving to exit for a break. At that point, Greg proposed progressing further into the cavern, yet the two ladies traded looks, communicating hesitance. They straightforwardly declined, referring to an absence of planning, as opposed to Greg. Anyway, Greg's male companion was anxious to investigate further, thus The ladies stayed by the entry, filling in as a posts prepared to look for help if necessary. Greg and his companion recognized this course of action as reasonable, and subsequently, everybody was satisfied with the arrangement. As Greg and his companion waited close to the cavern's entry, they saw the light starting to wane, a consequence of tempest mists assembling above in a fast variation to their darkening environmental elements. Greg shrewdly fixed his telephone in a plastic pack, reusing it as a shoddy spotlight to explore the caverns inside. This ad-libbed light source demonstrated priceless, empowering them to progress further without the peril of crashing into the cavern's rough edges or straying off into the concealed walls. Getting the telephone inside its defensive packaging, Greg lowered it to investigate submerged vistas. To his shock, the water's clearness uncovered the cavern floor beneath, flung with barbed rocks, a sight interesting yet far off, as wandering further down was not their purpose anyway. Another test immediately introduced itself. The rising water levels. Greg's companion voiced a worry that reverberated through the sinkhole. "Hello, man. The water's coming up. We have restricted time here before we want to make our leave." This rising tide highlighted the criticalness of their circumstance. Yet their determination to push forward stayed courageous, driven by a longing to uncover a greater amount of the cavern's secret profundities. As Greg and his companion moved profound into the cavern, they observed that the roof was getting lower. They needed to curve and turn to overcome difficult situations. It wasn't excessively confined at this point, yet it was starting to feel as such. They expected to dodge and wind through leaves behind water and parts where they needed to stroll. At this point, the cavern was black as night, with the exception of their little spotlight, which was running out of battery. This made Greg's companion's pulse quicker in light of the fact that he was beginning to stress. The two ladies holding up outside understood that Greg and his companion had been inside significantly longer than anticipated. In spite of this, Greg and his companion didn't stop. They continued going further into the cavern, searching for a secret entry. They needed to painstakingly clear their path through both watery regions and limited spots with sharp edges. The two ladies holding up external the cavern were beginning to feel awkward. They weren't invigorated any longer and simply believed Greg and his companion should emerge so they could all return home. They generally sort of realized that this experience would push them to their cut-off points. They had areas of strength for a based on looking for experiences, and they had some awareness of the restricted spaces in the cavern where just a single individual could just barely get through. At a time, they had concurred that Greg would go first into these difficult situations, since they confided in his choice. Making in the end, they arrived at an exceptionally limited piece of the cavern. Greg chose to go through it first, to look at it, and afterward let his companion know as to whether it was okay to follow. This piece of the cavern was truly cold, and they didn't know how long they had been investigating. Greg painstakingly traveled through the restricted space, utilizing water to make his arm dangerous, so he wouldn't cut himself on the stone box inside this thin section, and the region prompting it. The water was totally still, not moving by any means. Some way or another, Greg figured out how to get past. Yet in the interaction, he lost his telephone. This implied they no longer had their electric lamp, and everything was dim. Greg's companion attempted to find the telephone outside the thin room, and Greg glimpsed inside. However, neither of them could find it. Now they had no light by any means and were uncertain of where the telephone had pursued. Checking out a smidgen more, Greg didn't require his companion to follow him inside the restricted space. Unexpectedly, Greg's companion acknowledged he was unable to see Greg any longer. Uncertain of where Greg had gone, he chosen to stand by outside the limited entry, trusting Greg would return. Yet Greg didn't return. Confronted with a difficult decision, wait or endeavor to leave with next to no light, he realized he needed to pass on to find help for Greg. It was a troublesome excursion, yet he figured out how to get himself away from the cavern. Once outside, he raced to tell the two ladies holding up that Greg was missing. They promptly said he expected to return and track down Greg. However, he made sense of he was unable to find in Obscurity Cave, and was apprehensive he'd get lost too. The ladies outside the cavern would get it more and more stressed thoroughly, considering Greg being distant from everyone else in Obscurity Cave and conceivably in hot water. Simultaneously, Greg's companion realized he needed to return into the cavern to attempt to find Greg, despite the fact that it was extremely unsafe and he had no light inside the cavern. Everything felt very tense. His yells reverberated in the quiet, dim space, causing everybody to feel much more restless. He was near overreacting, not knowing where to search for Greg. Then in the black as night he saw little light. It provided him with a touch of trust, so he rushed towards it, swimming through the water. However, at the point when he arrived, he found it was only Greg's telephone still on, yet without any indication of Greg. This implied Greg was presently without his light, making it exceptionally difficult for him to get himself out. Understanding how serious this was, Greg's companion utilized the light from the telephone to advance back to the entry of the cavern. As he moved, he felt the significant weight of let the others know that Greg was all the while missing. When he got back, everybody felt truly miserable. The two ladies immediately asked him what happened. He made sense of he found Greg's telephone. However, not Greg, and they expected to summon for assist with correcting. They generally held up feeling apprehensive and trusting Greg would emerge from the cavern on his own. They settled on a crisis decision, and the nearby salvage group from Hana was there quickly on the grounds that they realized it was a difficult circumstance. Watching the salvage group prepare, Greg's companions felt frightened, yet expected uplifting news. They needed to stand by considerably longer for an extraordinary salvage group from Kahului, which was very far away. This group had more grounded lights and the right gear to dive deep into the cave. While the salvage began, Greg's companions were extremely tranquil, terrified of what the group could find. They were all wanting to think, not to hear any terrible news about Greg. Their most terrible feelings of trepidation materialized when the salvage group, utilizing brilliant lights, tracked down an individual not moving profound inside the cavern. It was Greg, just 75 FD away from the leave. They thought that he is soon after 1 p.m. Also, this miserable news made everybody, both Greg's companions and the salvage group, exceptionally furious. However, they realized what had happened. It required a long investment to bring Greg back from the cavern, since it was a troublesome spot to arrive at. They didn't get Greg out until after 5:00 p.m. Greg's unexpected passing was a shock to every individual who knew him. He was youthful, solid, and a decent swimmer. The way that he suffocated on the grounds that he lost his telephone, got isolated, and afterward couldn't find his direction was both befuddling and extremely miserable. It left everybody pondering precisely the way in which these things occurred, and prompted such a miserable end. That is all that for now. Gratitude for staying with us as far as possible. On the off chance that you are contacted or charmed by this story, remember to stir things up around town button and buy into our feed for more, anticipating having you with us for the following story.